Hey guys, I'm Joe, and I'm here today to do something that honestly has been on my mind for a while. I've done a review of The Dark Knight Rises. It's still on my channel, you can watch it if you like. This is probably not going to be the last video I do on it, but this is something that for the last 8 years since it's been released, it's really bothered me that all these people that have been criticizing it for all these plot points that they see as like some kind of a wrong done against the trilogy. I've been feeling the need to address some of these complaints. Now, I watched a video recently from Collider where they talk about the top 50 superhero films. Dark Knight Rises was like somewhere towards the bottom of the list, and it was very, very split. If you go watch the video, you'll probably see what I mean. Now, this video was from the year 2017, but even then, I was hoping that some people would maybe come around to it. And I've seen some videos online where people have started to warm up towards The Dark Knight Rises in some fashion, but unfortunately, a lot of the points that I heard were basically the same stuff that I heard from naysayers at the time that it was released. I'll try to address some of the biggest criticisms that have been thrown at it. Now, for those of you who don't know, I absolutely love The Dark Knight Rises. I think that it is one of the best conclusions ever put to a film series. And personally, it has the best ending to a movie that I've ever seen in my life. Those last 5 minutes, there's so many emotions I feel watching that finale. Like sad, happy, excited, inspired, bittersweet, any positive emotion you could think of. And the trilogy as a whole, I think, is probably the best superhero trilogy that's ever been made, and one of the best film trilogies of all time. Let's try to keep this focused on some of the points that I want to address, because it honestly just drives me up the wall whenever I see these complaints. And I don't understand why people can't think outside the box or take the time to think about them. But without further ado, let's get into it. And just so we're clear here, most if not all of these criticisms, I do understand why people would feel this way, but a lot of them I think are absolute BS. Complete BS. And some of them don't really take into consideration what was set up in the first two films. If you think about it in terms of the trilogy, which I'll get to later on. Let's start off with point number 1. Alfred would never give up on Bruce. He never said that he would give up on Bruce. That completely contradicts what he said in Batman Begins. Okay, fair enough, but it all depends on one's definition of giving up on somebody. No, Alfred did not give up on Bruce Wayne. He took an extreme measure in order to get him to quit his crusade. There's a big difference between giving up on someone and taking an extreme measure to stopping someone from getting himself killed. Think about it for a second. Bruce Wayne has lost everything. He's viewed as a murderer, he lost the love of his life, he's lost his physical health, and because he lost Rachel, he feels like he's got nothing left to live for, and he's just waiting for the opportune time to go back to being Batman and hoping to go out in a blaze of glory. And now that Bane has arrived on the scene, this gives Bruce an excuse to don the Batman suit again and go out and fight him. Now, he does obviously want to stop Bane, but deep down, considering where he's at emotionally, he really just wants to go out and die. Hence why he doesn't put up much of an effort in his first confrontation with Bane in the sewers. And Alfred even says this before Bruce goes out on the Batpod.
You're afraid that if I go back out there, I'll fail.
I'm afraid that you want to.
He's read up stories about Bane and how he used to be trained by Ra's al Ghul in the League of Shadows, the same people that trained Bruce Wayne. But this guy is the more extreme version of Bruce Wayne. This is a guy who all he knows is hatred. Alfred tries constantly to get him to reconsider. Bruce still refuses to budge. So therefore, he refuses to be an enabler, going as far as to revealing that he burned a letter from Rachel saying that she chose Harvey over him. And he even goes to say,
But it might also mean saving your life.
it's a last resort to getting Bruce to stop doing what he's doing. The way Alfred would have given up on Bruce is if he just continued running errands for him and just stood idly by as Batman continued back on his destructive path. Second point. Talia nullified Bane when she revealed herself. She became the main villain of the movie. Bane was demoted as a result, and therefore he didn't mean anything. Don't you remember what he did right before he died? Listen to what he says here.
We both know that I have to kill you now. You'll just have to imagine the fire.
Basically, in plain English, that means, I'm gonna blow your head off because you beat me to a pulp. Everyone in the movie that he comes into contact with, not just the citizens or the cops, but his henchmen, they're all terrified of him, including this guy. He's not just some blind, obedient dog that's gonna obey his master at every command. He's very much capable of making his own choices. If that was the case, he wouldn't have kicked Batman down to the ground and pointed a shotgun in his face. He was dead set on blowing Batman's brains out right before Catwoman showed up. Next point. All of the Gotham cops were foolishly trapped underground. How could they be so stupid? How could Commissioner Gordon use all of his resources to send every cop down into the sewers like that? It really makes me wonder, were you guys even paying attention to the other two movies? This is not the first time that the Gotham Police Department has messed up. They're not the smartest people in the world. Most of the police departments sent riot cops onto the Narrows Island to try to contain the riots from Arkham Asylum, only to be incapacitated by Scarecrow's fear toxin when it was ignited by the microwave emitter stolen from Wayne Enterprises. And once again, they put too many of their eggs in one basket by sending every single cop to every single hospital across Gotham when the Joker issued an ultimatum to kill Coleman Reese in order to save a hospital from being blown up. He didn't say specifically which one, but the police department had to search every single hospital across the city. Therefore, they were stretched extremely thin. And to set the record straight here, not every single cop in Gotham City was trapped underground. There were dozens of cops left above ground in order to spy on Bane's men's movements and figure out what their patterns were. With the benefit of hindsight though, it's still not a really smart decision for a large portion of the Gotham City police force to be assigned underground. And it's not like Gordon ordered every single available cop immediately into the tunnels after he first saw Bane and his army. Gordon ordered a grid to be worked in order to find the masked man he saw. And thanks to Deputy Commissioner Foley's half-hearted effort in carrying out his superior's orders, this was going to take a lot of time. Once Bane emerged and took high-profile hostages below the surface, Gordon's frustration had finally boiled over. At the time, he had no way of knowing Bane had already spent months pouring explosive-laced concrete into the city's tunnels. This isn't the first time that Gordon and the GCPD have been outsmarted by the villain, with the League of Shadows in Batman Begins, and the Joker's plan in The Dark Knight with the hospitals. This situation in Dark Knight Rises is no different from the other two. Next point, the disappearing limp. Okay, the knee brace that Bruce uses in order to help his knee, I'll admit that is pushing it a little bit, but as for the rest of the movie, we don't see it come off, and a lot of people are wondering, well, where did it go? Wouldn't have Bane ordered it to be removed? He could have easily done that, yeah. But we never actually see the brace get removed, nor does anybody mention the removal of it. There's no shot of Bruce's bare leg to show that the brace is no longer there. If he stopped limping after he put it on, it's never shown being removed, and the limp never reappeared. So that leaves us only one conclusion. The brace was still on the entire time. It never came off. Bane could have easily taken the brace off of Bruce's leg, but he chose not to for one reason. He wanted Bruce to believe that he could still climb out of the pit. He wanted him to cling on to some kind of hope, just like everybody in that prison did, that they could still find a way to climb out of there. And he wanted to make Bruce sweat by watching on TV what was happening to the city and make him feel hopeless to stop it from happening. Bane is obviously a vicious person, but he at least knows how to fight fair. He wanted Bruce to believe that he could climb out of that pit and make him feel hopeless to do anything. Another point, John Blake figured out Bruce's secret because of a smile? That's so dumb. How could he figure that out? Well, give it half a second's thought. John Blake is an orphan, just like Bruce is. They both experienced tragedies, and they both experienced extreme anger and feeling a strong desire for justice. He was shuffled around a bunch of different foster homes. They understand. Yeah, they always do that. But then they want the angry foster kid to do something he knows he can't do. Move on. And once he can't do that, they ship him to a boys' home. I figured it out too late. You gotta learn to hide the anger. Practice smiling in front of the mirror. It's like putting on a mask. And then later on, when Bruce showed up after his 7-year absence, and when Blake and his friends saw him at the orphanage with a beautiful woman on his arm, he saw Bruce Wayne do a similar smile, the same thing that John Blake taught himself. A forced smile. Bruce Wayne's past was already known at that point. So Bruce Wayne comes onto the scene and then coincidentally this bat figure shows up. Normal people would have been like, okay, could they possibly be the same person? But when they see him act the way he does in public, that would make the city go, yeah, no, he's not Batman, he's not that selfless. Only John Blake would be able to figure that out. As the old saying goes, it takes one to know one. And it also mirrors another thing from the comics. John Blake is a combination of all three Robin characters. Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, and Jason Todd. Dick Grayson was an orphan, and I believe he was also a cop at one point in the comics. I don't know exactly which one. I'm not well versed in the comics. But John Blake also said that he experienced extreme anger over his situation, just like Jason Todd does. And Blake was also able to figure out Bruce's secret, just like Tim Drake does with Batman in the comics. Tim Drake, John Blake. Blake knew what it was like to be a child who had to hide his true feelings over witnessing the murder of a parent. He saw past the forced smile right to the pain and anger that Bruce was hiding underneath. With the Playboy persona completely nullified, Blake was actually able to reach the conclusion that would have been equally obvious to anyone in Gotham had Bruce never put on such an act to begin with. Gordon, on the other hand, did not have a similar emotional experience to what Bruce or Blake went through. And more importantly, it's stated multiple times in the film, Gordon didn't care who Batman was. So it's not unbelievable for someone to find an answer to a question that he or she doesn't care about that much. And probably the biggest one that people keep bringing up. How did Bruce Wayne get back into Gotham City? He seemingly got back in like a day or 2 hours. That makes no sense. This is stupid. It really boggles my mind that people can't actually think and pay attention to the details in this movie. But if I have to explain it to people, I'm gonna do it. Bruce Wayne did not get back in 1 day, and he did not get back in 2 hours either. Right before Bruce Wayne escapes from the pit, we see Lucius Fox and Miranda Tate meet up with the Special Forces operatives, and they say that the bomb is gonna go off in 23 days. Now let's do the math here for a second. What's 7 times 3? 21. And you add 2 to that, what does that equal? 23. That's 3 weeks and 2 days. And I repeat, 3 weeks and 2 days. Not 1 day and not 2 hours. After he says 23 days and all the Special Forces guys are killed, the next thing we see is that Bruce is able to finally get out of the pit. In that 3-week time span, he had plenty of time in order to find his way back to Gotham, sneak back into the city, into the Batcave, and figure out what exactly his plan is. And he had more than enough time to set up the bat signal on the Brooklyn Bridge. Bruce knows the city better than anybody else. He could have easily snuck onto one of the trucks that were coming into the city with supplies, or he could have just gone through the sewers where there wasn't any barricades set up by Bane's men, or he could have just used stealth mode in the Batwing in order to fly over the city. There's all kinds of possibilities there, and as far as how he was able to get back from one side of the world to the next, don't you remember Batman Begins? He traveled the world for 7 years with no money, no credit cards, no resources of any kind. If he's able to do that once before, there is no reason, and I repeat, no reason why he can't do that again. I gotta admit though, it does kind of bug me that we don't know exactly how he got back, but when I think about it, yeah, how interesting could that story have actually been? It was probably better to leave it to the audience's imagination and also move the story along. This is a 2-hour, 45-minute long film, so stuff like that is not integral to moving the plot forward. And the final point that I want to address is that Bruce Wayne would never retire as Batman, and in the comics he would never give up. How could he give up being Batman? A fair point, yes. But I think you also need to consider something else. In terms of the trilogy and the tone that they were going for with this series, him going on for life in the comics is one thing. Dark Knight Returns, and yes, even Batman v Superman, which is obviously comic inspired, where the reality is extremely heightened, you have the creative liberty to explore what Batman would be like if he was 50 or 60 years old. Comics will obviously go on, but realistically speaking, Bruce Wayne's not going to be able to carry on his crusade into his 40s or 50s, let alone his 60s. By the time Dark Knight Rises comes in, he's about close to 40 years old. Being Batman is a physically demanding job. We see that throughout all 3 movies, like when he wakes up after his first night out as Batman with all the bruises on his arms and his abdomen, and even in Dark Knight where he's sewing up the dog bite that he got from the Rottweilers. In this movie, no cartilage in his leg, right? No cartilage in his legs. And also getting his back broken by Bane on his knee. If that happened to Bruce when he was 60, there's no way he'd be able to carry that on. Even if he got that far in his age, no matter how much physicality he was able to maintain, that would have been the end of his career right there. Now, as opposed to what we usually see in the comics and other iterations, Christopher Nolan takes a different approach in presenting Batman as an invaluable symbol for Gotham, but also a destructive addiction for Bruce Wayne. The need to be Batman was something that Bruce had to overcome, and he did, as demonstrated by his happy retirement in Florence with Selina Kyle in the film's final moments. This was something that was already alluded to in Batman Begins. Bruce Wayne as Batman wanted to be a symbol to inspire other people to take back the city from the scum of Gotham's underbelly. And at the end of the movie, Rachel Dawes says to him, maybe someday when Gotham no longer needs Batman, I'll see him again. By the time of The Dark Knight, Bruce Wayne has been Batman for about a year, and he's already looking for a way out by having Harvey Dent show up as Gotham's true savior. And Harvey even says,
whoever the Batman is, he doesn't want to do this for the rest of his life. How could he? Batman is looking for someone to take up his mantle.
Bruce was already looking for a way out long before he retired. And even Alfred says to him in the beginning of Dark Knight Rises, you hung up your cape and your cowl, but you didn't move on. You never went to find a life. And now that Selina Kyle has showed up, it gives him a perfect opportunity to finally move on. And he already sees a successor in John Blake, who shares a similar hatred for injustice like Bruce does. This iteration of Batman never takes a vow to spend the rest of his days fighting crime. Not in Dark Knight Rises, not in Dark Knight, and certainly not in Batman Begins. He focused on the disease, not the symptoms of crime in Gotham. He took aim at the mob, as that was the entity responsible for the roadblocks that kept the good citizens from saving their city. Batman was successful in taking down the mob, while also overcoming unexpected challenges, courtesy of villains like the Joker and Bane. In Nolan's grounded world, Batman was a very mortal man who aged and sustained injuries from which he could never fully recover. He never intended to be Batman forever. No pun intended there. And it just looked like it might have ended up that way for a while. Instead, he accomplished his goals in dissolving the mob, removing the new threats, and creating an enduring symbol that will inspire new protectors of Gotham when they are needed, like John Blake, as is shown in the final shot of the movie when he arrives in the Batcave. Is it faithful to the Batman that we know from the comics? Maybe not exactly the Batman from the comics, but for this interpretation of the character, it feels consistent within this trilogy and this universe. And for Nolan and the writers to end the series the way they did, that was a really bold move. So those are my 2 cents on some of the criticisms towards Dark Knight Rises. I couldn't obviously cover everything, but I wanted to try to explain some of the criticisms that people have thrown at, because I honestly think that a lot of these critiques are BS, and I don't think any of them are plot holes or inconsistencies if you actually take the time to think about them. And if you disagree with me, that's totally fine, but hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are, and I'll see you all very soon.